You are ready. You are ready to choose to grieve. So this first 9 days, 9 weeks is about getting in and choosing to grieve. If you have to go back and watch this video again, do that. As I said before, I'm filming in my happy place, and being able to find your happy place and finding ways to be there so that the grief is easier. It is easier when you're in a place that you feel nature and you feel love and you feel warmth. For me, it's warmth and water. That is that for me. But the reality is in life, we don't always get to choose to be in our physical happy place, right? So you might have to be there, mentally or emotionally. But in the thick of it, if you could try to find time to take care of yourself and go to your happy place. So in this first 9 lessons, every day, through this whole 45, I'm going to ask you to think about those 5 selves. What are you doing for self-care? What are you doing for your spiritual self? What are you doing for self-regulation, self-improvement, and self-movement? So that will be every day. I will ask you, and you can do other journaling. There might be, little questions throughout. But the first lesson talks very specifically about controlled grief. Remember, I said I started doing this after my son died in 2016. And if you bought the actual workbook, you can see where my thought process was the first time I went through this. But the reality is I continue to go through it. You will continue to go through it. The more you choose to do controlled grief, the less frequent and less intense it will be when you do it. But it's just about taking that time, very specifically that time, to grieve. I ask that you commit yourself to these 45 days, weeks, however long it takes you. I commit to the process of getting through, choosing to grieve, those layers of grief, finding your truth, and then finding your voice in that. We know that suppressing grief for a long time is not actually effective or healthy. Suppressing your grief might work for a period of time, but it will come out in other ways. And grief is not about acceptance. You will always feel that loss. It is about being able to effectively feel that pain and reconcile it. The frequency and intensity in which you have to feel it will decrease. So that's your day/week 1. The second lesson goes into acknowledging grief. This was based on the Kubler-Ross theory, which we all learn in school. And when I first started trying to process my grief, I thought, this is ridiculous. There is no way it's just this process of denial, avoidance, anger, bargaining, acceptance. So, but what does happen is that denial might look like numbness, shock, confusion. I was in shock for a solid 9 months after Maya died. That was not expected. Avoidance. Sometimes you just don't want to think about it. And that's okay, but it's not okay forever. And that's why it's here in this choose grief. Questioning or bargaining, we always think about bargaining like I'm trying to bring them back to life. No, it's those things that you say to yourself, oh, I should have, if only I would have, right? And then depression. I have not met someone who has lost a child that is not experiencing depression. And even to the point of feeling suicidal, which we'll talk about when I got into the depths of this, I really was feeling suicidal. And then just about being present, that it is possible. And on the back page of that, it kind of has this map looking thing where just write down the things that feel depressing, the things that you're questioning, the avoidance, the denial, the anger. Again, if you were going through the Mentally Strong Method course, you could also see that even though this grief might not be a pattern in your life, the way in which we respond to life is a pattern, and the Mentally Strong Method helps us get through some of those things. The third lesson is, those grief theories that I was talking about, and actually working through those. Here's some examples, but you can research anything and then just kind of question them. Do they make sense to you? And I'll tell you, when I first started, I talked about this in the intro, that I got really frustrated because I felt like nobody who was writing on grief and researching grief had actually experienced the grief that I had experienced. Find the nuggets in that, and let go of the things that trigger you. You're right, they might not have experienced the loss that you have experienced. That doesn't mean we can't learn something from them, right? It's about self-improvement. It's about choosing to grieve. We'll do this assignment more than once in this 45 days/weeks. So I want you to just pick one today. And I'll tell you, as we go through, there were some that were real nuggets and warming to my heart as I worked through them. The next lesson is why me? We've all, if you have lost a child or someone significant in your life, I know you have thought about that why me. But it's not a concrete. There's various answers to this question, and it's very specific to you, and it's actually a spiritual question. But I don't want you to go to your spiritual leaders per se, because I feel like every time I've gone to other people with this why me question, I get things like, oh, well, God doesn't give you more than you can handle. And I honestly want to say, F you. I don't see you having to handle what I have to handle. And, and just people are trying to be comforting. I'm not saying cut these people off. They're doing what they can to try to share that with you or try to encourage you. But this is a question you have to ask yourself, and you have to go into prayer and meditation and listen for the answer. Oftentimes when we're in prayer or meditation, we are like asking or trying to give, and we need to sit and listen and try to receive. I can tell you, I have gotten various answers to the why me question, but the most significant for me was when my daughter, after her passing, and I felt connected with her, she said, time and space is not a real thing. It's a limitation, a human limitation. And not only, what that meant to me was that this 20 plus years that I'm going to have to live on this earth without my children is nothing in comparison to my eternal connection with them. And so I don't know if that is going to resonate with you. And if it doesn't come specifically to you, then it's not for you, right? Like, that was between me and God, me and my daughter, and it was genuine and true to myself. And that why me question, you've got to dig very specifically for yourself. And then we have 2 lessons, both lesson 6, day, week, however, and 9, that are going through why the Mentally Strong Method. We have to separate our grief from the other things going on in our life. The morning that my daughter died and I had to do CPR on her was traumatic. Trauma is to be released, processed and released. Grief is not to be processed and released. Grief is to be processed and cherished. We do different things with these different categories. And so it's important that we separate them. Those negative thoughts that keep going on in my head, those are not beneficial. Those do not help my grief. They don't help yours either. Those negative things that you say to yourself, oh, I should have done this, if I was a better mom, if I was a better wife, if I was this, if I would have done this, if I would have called, if I would have picked him up, if I wouldn't have been so hard. I don't know what you're saying to yourself, but those are negative thoughts. That's not grief. And negative thoughts can be controlled, can be stopped. Your grief, unfortunately, you can't change. You can change those negative thoughts. Your behaviors and choices, the things that you're choosing to do. If there's things you're choosing to do that are not beneficial to you, and you're using your grief as an excuse, or your depression from your grief as an excuse, those are your choices, your behaviors. I would say grief almost always has some sort of injustice or spiritual conflict, but we deal with these things differently. Injustices and spiritual conflict is combated with a relationship, with a spiritual relationship and gratitude. That doesn't help your grief. So many people have said, oh, but you have other children. So, I don't mean to be like, that doesn't take away my grief, but it can lessen some of the injustice and spiritual conflict. And so when we are able to separate these things, it allows us to put grief in its place of cherishing. And, that goes into this last piece where there's two days on this, 7 and 8, where most of you have anger as an external cover, or depression. Depression is just anger turned inward. And whatever that top layer is, we have to get through it. So, when you're looking at day/week 7 and 8, this is that outer layer, that protective layer of this pain is too much. I can't bear. You have to bear it. It's yours. No one can take it from you. No one can feel this pain for you. Getting through that anger, and then again, we talk about the mentally strong method, how to get through that anger and then put things in the right category so that we're doing things specifically for that. So that is kind of this first chapter of lessons of like choosing to grieve. And whatever else you need to do in this space of choosing to grieve before you get into the layers of grief. And I will see you in the next chapter.